What the hell? I was going to talk about some more stuff. Oh yeah. So there was this news story. There was this news story that I did want to talk about. It was called. It comes from Politico. Feds likely to challenge Microsoft's $69 billion Activision takeover. So according to this article, if you remember, Microsoft is trying to acquire Activision. I don't think the deal goes through until 2023. But the deal is like, they announced it, quite a while ago. It was pretty big news. So one of the big hooplas, I guess you could call it, when this happened was, is this monopolistic? Which is a fair question to ask when a big company buys another really big company in the same, sector industry. So I believe, so there's like two different, is this monopolistic versus is this going to get blocked for being monopolistic or like a trust? Those are technically two different questions. I honestly said no to either of them. I have been a consistent believer that I think the games industry is one of the hardest industries to actually gain a monopoly over, just because it has the games industry has one of the most supported, thriving indie scenes of any entertainment medium besides, I don't know, maybe music. It feels like now again, I'm not saying every indie studio is doing incredible, because they're not, but I feel every like couple years there's an indie game that just becomes the biggest thing ever. And you can't really say that about like indie films or even a lot of indie music. You can, but like indie movies, not really. Maybe within like film buff circles, but you don't see you don't see something like Among Us or Five Nights at Freddy's or Undertale, things that were made by like one person or a really small team of people, just completely taking over the public consciousness, right? You don't see that in other industries. And the fact that that's even possible, I think, is indicative of the fact that it would be really difficult to get any one company to get a majority share of the market, especially with distribution platforms, like maybe of the console market, maybe. But it sort of happened with Nintendo and Sega, but beside the point. That was like in the 80s, and they were in the 90s. With like Steam and Epic and Itch, and even other ways to get games, I think it's really difficult to get a true monopoly on the games industry. Now, does that mean that I support the buyout? Not necessarily. I think it's better that things stay separate like this, because I think on principle, I don't like the idea of one company becoming an increasingly large conglomerate of other companies. I feel like there's a lot of situations in which... So, like, here's a good example. Sort of a recent happening, too, with Ticketmaster. So, Ticketmaster, at least in the U.S., or maybe even all of North America, Ticketmaster has a monopoly, like a real monopoly, on ticket sales for events. And this has pretty much led to the freedom to be anti-consumer. So I think what the event was something, there was like a Taylor Swift concert or something, which was immediately completely sold out, and tickets were being resold by scalpers for fucking, hundreds, thousands of dollars. And just like, dude, come on. Spending that much money on a fucking concert ticket is like, it's just exploitation. But Ticketmaster allows this to happen because, hey, fuck it. Who's gonna challenge us? If you have a bad experience at Ticketmaster, there's not really an alternative you can go to. So there's a problem. I recently had, so my favorite band of all time is Modest Mouse. Recently, they announced a tour because it's the 25th anniversary of their second studio album, The Lonesome Crowded West. And Modest Mouse is like really important to me, and that album is amazing. It's incredible. I was just re-listening to it the other day, and the idea of like seeing some of those songs live is like, oh my god, that's fucking awesome. Seeing the whole album performed live, that would be awesome. And they're playing relatively nearby. So I was like, let me look up if there's any tickets still for sale. Nope, it's all resales. It's all resales. And at minimum $90. Minimum $90. And it quickly jumps into the $100, $200 category. And for me, it's like, fuck. Like, Modest Mouse is probably one of the most important musical artists to me and to my life. And that album is fucking incredible. And it means so much to me. To see some of those songs performed live is like what I wouldn't give. Well, $200. $200 is what I wouldn't give. I'm sorry. It's a little out of my possibility range right now. I don't know. I don't even like asking for stuff like for that kind of money to buy that. So I'm like, it sucks. Fuck. I can go see this. This would be so cool. I hope they don't die before they go on another tour like this. So like, a bit of a bummer, whatever. I get over it. I can get over it. But that's like a dumb experience, and it's like, shit, well, if there was an alternative, but you can't really, and the reason for that is because it's basically one company that that bought out other companies that handled ticket distribution, and then basically pressured venues into cooperating with them and making their tickets exclusively available via Ticketmaster, because otherwise we're not even going to sell the tickets for your event. And because we're the most centralized, easy way to buy tickets online, you're going to lose out on sales. So like, oh fuck, so they feel pressure to do it. And this is what happens when you aren't allowed to have competition. Do I think that would happen with Activision Blizzard and Microsoft? Not necessarily. But on principle, I don't think it should be allowed. No, not allowed. I don't think it should happen. I don't know if it should it be allowed to happen? I mean, I don't technically think it's breaking any laws. I wouldn't say that. We've seen, I covered a thing about it where Sony tried to claim that Call of Duty was like a genre unto itself, which is really silly. But like, I don't know. See, it's one of those things where like, yeah, I guess it's technically legal and it doesn't have any immediate repercussions that I could see, or anything that would really affect me. Maybe if I was more into like Blizzard games, then maybe. But I don't think it should happen. If it was up to me, I would. If I was the ruler of the world, I would say no. But I'm not the ruler of the world, and I don't necessarily want to be, or think I should be. I should not rule the world. That would be a terrible idea. So we got this story from Politico, and they're saying they're still running. The FTC is still conducting an investigation into whether or not they should be allowed to make this buyout. I'm kind of surprised. I mean, I guess, we're near the end of the year. I don't think they said when in 2023 it would be finalized. It's definitely gonna develop. We're either gonna have it's either gonna go through or it's gonna get blocked. And if it gets blocked, that could be knuckle crack. Sorry for those people who hate that. If you listen to this podcast enough, you should be used to me cracking my knuckles. If it gets blocked, I think that's a bigger deal than it going through. Because if it gets blocked, I would imagine that would set a precedent. Because the court loves precedents. Courts love to be like, because so much stuff that gets decided in court is like, well, morality is very subjective and things. Where do things cross the line? Who's going to decide that? You know what courts love? When someone's already decided it for them in a prior case. So if this sets some kind of precedent for like how big is too big of an acquisition, it could legitimately change how these things go forward in the future, or whether or not anyone's even going to be making an acquisition like this. I assumed when the news first came out, I think you can go listen back to that podcast. I assumed they had already cleared this. I would imagine that with a $69 billion deal, where Microsoft is buying a gigantic company that literally could threaten the government if they wanted to. Remember that most government machines still run on Windows XP, and they can't move forward to Windows 10 or a different operating system because so much stuff from that's decades old is contingent on Microsoft Windows XP, and Microsoft specifically has a team devoted to security updates just for the government's version of Windows XP, and if they wanted to, they could fucking maybe just not do that, maybe? So there's a very funny relationship between Microsoft and the US government, and that kind of a company buying a huge company, I would imagine that before they even went in for the meeting, that they had a prior contact in the government to say, hey, is this gonna raise any alarms if we move to make this acquisition? Did that happen? I don't know, because I mean, again, my assumption was they already made it and they got the all clear, so that's why they went ahead with signing the deal. But maybe they really didn't and they just assumed. That seems a little dumb. Or maybe they got the go ahead and then someone else said, hey, who told you could do that? Who told them they could do that? Kind of thing. If it gets blocked, that could, I think, legitimately be a line in the sand moment of, okay, this enormity of an acquisition is not allowed to be made anymore. Excuse me. This article doesn't necessarily have any. It's pretty much just a recap. It's essentially just saying, hey, the investigation is still not over. The fact that it's taken this long might cast into doubt whether or not, maybe this is real. Maybe it's not just a formality to do the investigation. Maybe there is something here, and that's why it's taking a while. But we don't know, and we won't know until they actually do give a date, or a time period. The companies have until July next year to close the deal without renegotiating the agreement. An administrative lawsuit filed later this year or in January would be unlikely to be resolved by July and could potentially force the companies to abandon the deal. So if there is if there's something by the beginning of the year, let's say, of next year, if there's an active lawsuit about, hey, you can't do it, the deal as it exists now would have to be it would have to be rewritten or extended or something like that before that lawsuit from the FTC. Until it gets done, they could just kick the can down the road. I don't know, but it's an interesting situation, and I do kind of hope that the FTC ends up blocking it. but I don't know if it's a certainty. Things will get very interesting for these players though in the near future.